Good afternoon and welcome to this second press conference with Commissioner Kubilius, who will present you the EU Space Act and the vision for the European space economy. Commissioner, please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot. Well, really today is a historical day for space because of two reasons. And the first one is that two European astronauts now are traveling to International Space Station, Hungarian and Polish one. I would like to congratulate them, and I hope that everything will go very successfully. And of course, this is a very nice coincidence that exactly after quite a long delays, they started their mission exactly today. When we in the college passed, I would call again, quite historical decisions. And I will try to explain. First of all, really, before starting to speak about space, I would like to introduce some historical context in order to better understand the role of space, where we are now and what is the future, and to remind you on several historical parallels. When I'm looking back into the history of Europe, of our civilization, I see that in a very clear way, for example, we can say that 19th century was a century of railways, which were started to be built in 19th century, and of trains. And they were invented in that century, they were tested, and then they became massive industry and massive service, which changed quite a lot in our economical development. If to look in the same way into the 20th century, so the 20th century, from my point of view, was a century of automobiles and planes. They were invented a little bit before, beginning of 20th century, but became a massive industry and massive service during the 20th century. And there was what I would call a revolutionary expansion after the first period at the beginning. So it spread to mass consumption, and the situation started to demand agreed rules of the road and safety standards. And space also reminds of economic development of frontier territories of the United States in the 19th century. At the very beginning, bravery of the first explorers, then spread of railways, and finally industrialization of frontier territories, which created huge economic success. If we use the same historical analogy, I can call that the 21st century will be the century of space and the century of the new frontier space. And it's absolutely clear that we are at the start also of a space revolution. Very soon, space will become massive with huge economic potential. Frontier exploration of space will open a new space for economic developments. In the next 10 years, there is a very clear prediction, around 50,000 new satellites will be launched. So we will have 5 times as many active satellites as there are today. And the growth of satellites is exponential. In the next 10 years, 2.5 times as many satellites as in the entire 70 years of the space age before us will be launched into space. And at the same time, space economy is expected to triple in size in the next decade, up to $1.8 trillion and grows 9% per year. Space definitely makes huge impact on different segments of our economy. There are calculations by experts that without space services available today, we would lose around 10% of our economy. For the time being, we are quite good and strong. We have our Galileo, Copernicus, and forthcoming IRIS², which are or will be the best satellite services in the world. So we still can call ourselves a global space power. We have top industry scientists and engineers. But we can do even better. We can strengthen our space industry, which is producing satellites, launching rockets, and does a service for our systems on the ground. We can do much better how we are using data, huge amount of data, which our satellite services are generating. Space data economy is what we need to look with a lot of attention and ambitions how we can develop that. For example, today Copernicus produces more than 300 petabytes. I even looked into Google, what does it mean, petabytes? So peta is 15. So you can imagine what is the number. So 300 petabytes of data a day, and these are mostly exploited by United States companies, not Europeans, for example, such as Google Earth. That is why we today presented a Commission communication, a vision for European space economy, and it gives clear vision of what we shall do in the nearest future to strengthen our space economy in all the different areas of it, and what is our long-term vision. So we need to understand that the space frontier during the next decades will become more and more industrialized. In space economy, in space operations, manufacturing in space, lunar economy will become a new reality, and we need to prepare ourselves for that. First of all, building our railways into space frontier, our autonomous transportation and launching systems in space. We need to catch up in global competition with space launching and transportation services. Without that, we will leave to somebody else the revolutionary space frontier transformation into very profitable space economy. Such a revolutionary development brings new possibilities, but also new risks, new challenges, and new strategic tasks for us. Very similar to what happened 100 years ago with automobiles and started to happen with planes. First of all, space is becoming overcrowded because satellites are not the only thing up here. I was telling you how the numbers of satellites are increasing exponentially. Besides satellites, there is space junk or space debris, 140 million pieces of space debris, vastly increasing risk of collision, of incident, potentially damaging satellites, disrupting communication, navigation, and other vital space services. That is why it's time for us to have rules of the road in space and safety rules in space. Like 100 years ago, it was done with the traffic on terrestrial roads. And second, our space market can become very much fragmented. And we shall be not able to use the power of our big single market, united market, to create global competitiveness of our space industry, like it had happened, unfortunately, with our defense industry. Why? Because at the moment, 12 member states have their own space laws, and one additional is coming. So we have a patchwork of national space laws, which creates a potpourri of different rules of the road and different regulations on safety. Imagine you are a company, space company, and need to follow 13 different sets of rules. This fragmentation is bad for business, bad for competitiveness, bad for our future in space. And because of that, we are not competitive enough. That is what the Draghi report shows very clearly. So we want Europe to benefit from that massive space economy, which is starting to appear. And with the Space Act, we will do something new. Because today we propose one single set of rules, which will be good for space companies, good for citizens, and good for Europe. And that is how we will create a single market for space. To be precise, a single market for space services and space data. So in some way, today really we make history. Because the European Union Space Act is the first time ever we regulate space activities in the European Union. The frontier is going to become a part of a single market with smart regulation. The Space Act will create common, stable, and predictable rules. That will help to make our industry more competitive, creating a level playing field for all. The Space Act applies to and benefits all companies providing services on the single market, space operators and data providers, European companies and non-European companies, public and private operators, companies big and small, with special support for smaller companies. Space, now a few words on the substance of the Space Act. It targets the most important problems and growing dangers that can endanger our future in space, namely that space is increasingly becoming congested and contested. First on congested. As I said before, space is becoming quite crowded and is getting exponentially more crowded. by satellites and by debris. Even a piece the size of a ping-pong ball can cause massive destruction. With a doomsday scenario, a cascade of collisions called the Kessler effect, a sort of space avalanche, a chain reaction of collisions, destroying satellites and making space launches impossible. Also, space traffic is massively increasing. But there are now no traffic rules in space, as I said before. So it is time to put in place rules of the road for space to prevent damage and disasters and protect space services. And it is clear that these space traffic rules need to be the same all over Europe. And these traffic rules we're bringing with the Space Act. Space traffic rules in structure are very similar to terrestrial traffic rules. You need to register and have a driving license if you want to drive your car. You need to register your car, and your car needs to match technical safety and pollution standards. That is very well-known practice to everybody. Space Act will demand very similar from space participants. Operators will need to register services also, and here will be technical safety and environmental criteria which those services will need to match. Our space assets are not only in danger from accidents, but also from deliberate attacks. Space is not only congested, but also contested. Contested because threats to space systems are increasing, both cyber and physical risks. We know there is a continuous radio frequency interference with our systems, jamming and spoofing. We know there are many cyber attacks. In fact, the first thing Russia attacked a few hours before Russia invaded Ukraine was Viasat KA-SAT network. So with our Space Act, we will increase the resilience of our satellites and space operations. So I will try really to very briefly to remind again some most important points of what is in the Space Act. First, we propose rules on space debris mitigation, collision avoidance or orbital traffic rules to ensure the safety of launches and satellites. Second, we propose rules for risk management through the life cycle of space missions and rules for reporting incidents, building on NIS2 and SER directives to ensure the resilience of the space infrastructure. Third, we will propose a methodology to calculate the environmental footprint of space activities to promote more responsible and sustainable space activities. The Space Act will impact only commercial and civilian satellites. Any military space objects used for defense or national security purposes are excluded from the scope of the regulation. And at the end, 5 most important points regarding European companies. First, the regulation will apply, I repeat, to all operators that provide their services on the single market, both EU and non-EU companies. We aim for level playing field for all operators. Second, there is no additional red tape, as the national authorization processes as such will remain the same. What improves is a recognition of the authorizations issued by other European Union member states. And third, the regulation considers the needs of smaller players, such as SMEs and researchers, through creation of light regimes to ensure proportionality. And fourth, to support European companies when implementing the requirements, we propose a set of supportive measures, such as capacity building and technical assistance. This will also help smaller companies to offset possible implementation costs. And fifth, companies will have sufficient time to prepare for the implementation of the Space Act. It will only apply to authorizations of satellites planned to be launched as of 1st January 2030. So, to conclude, space is a new frontier. At the beginning, on the frontier, there are no rules, putting all space activities in danger. Time comes for change. With the Space Act, we are bringing law and order to the frontier, we are protecting our space assets from damage and attacks, and we are creating a single market for space, and also opening up export markets with mutual recognition within Europe and international. The Space Act is opening for us the gates into the century of space, when frontline space will become a mature part of a single market.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. We now have time to take your questions. Please raise your hand and introduce yourself. Let's start with Maximilian in the press room.
Maximilian Henning from Tagesspiegel background. Commissioner Kubilius, the Commission initially announced a space law in 2023 for 2024. We are now well into 2025. Why the delay? Thank you.
Well, for me, it's quite difficult to explain what was the reason to delay it with the previous Commission. With my experience, I like to deliver, so that's what I can tell. And of course, we took, a lot of job was done by previous Commission. I can thank all of those people who were working with that very special regulation, very needed regulation, historical regulation in the previous Commission. Of course, I would like to thank very much everybody who are working on this regulation now, my team, and DEFIS people, and all, a lot of discussions we had with member states, with other commissioners. So this is a product which really has a lot of collective input from everybody who understood that really time is coming for us to have clear rules of the road in space.
Thank you, Commissioner. Theophan.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have a question regarding the deadline for application, which is 2030. Don't you think that it's a bit, it's very far away in 5 years' time? By this time, all the constellations will already be shot in space?
Well, definitely, we want to introduce that regulation and rules in such a way that all the participants of space activities would be ready for such new regulation. So we're ready to help first of all, participants of space, but also we need to create, in some cases, new capacities, institutional capacities, in order really to be successful in implementation of this regulation.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Let's go to, I will come back in the press room if we still have time. Let's go to Mathieu online. Please activate your camera too.
Hello, thank you very much. Commissioner, can you please walk us through the additional requirements that third country space operator will have to deal with? And a second related question is about this equivalent regime. Do you anticipate that the US, for one, will get such an adequacy decision? Thank you very much.
Well, for such countries, really, all the requirements are similar as for participants from EU member states. That is, what we call level playing field. And that is how, again, you can look into similarity with the traffic on the roads, where those who are driving, in different countries, they need to follow the rules which are in those countries. So this is one thing. Now on
Mathieu, can you please remind us, can you please recall your second question, please? Repeat it.
Sure. No, I asked about this equivalent adequacy decision, and I was just wondering whether already you anticipate that the US will get one. Because in the proposal, there is something that says that Commission can grant adequacy decisions, equivalent decision, and then providers won't have to comply to EU rules.
Yeah, of course, in implementation, we shall have perhaps a lot of discussions. We shall talk also with our partners who are not members of EU, in order to have common agreements to allow also their participants to use our rules, or we should use their rules. So if that's, maybe I misunderstood the question, but I see all the possibilities really to go into good contact with all our partners.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. David, online, please.
Yes, thank you. David Carretta, Radio Radicale, Italian radio. For a non-expert of this sector, just a question. With those rules in place, would Starlink, an European Starlink, be able to have success in Europe, or this rule could be an obstacle to operator with are very innovative? Thank you.
Well, it will depend on Starlink, but there are also, what I said, it's very clear regulation that everybody who is participating in giving services, space services on European Union territory, they will need to follow those rules.
Thank you very much. Lorenzo, please.
Lorenzo Consoliasca, News Italy. Just to add to the question of David, if a country like Italy buys the services from Starlink, which is from the US, with the new rules, will this be how will this be accepted? I mean, is because it's Italy that is buying that, and then it will be recognized with the mutual recognition in the market, or there will be a European set of conditions that will have to be respected by Italy and by Starlink?
That will be a European set of conditions which will be equal for all the member states, and member states would be able to choose how they're implementing through their national agency or through European Union Space Agency. That is also will be possible, but in general, again, I can repeat that the whole point is creating level playing field for all the space operators which want to operate on European Union territory, including whatever, including Starlink or somebody else.
Thank you very much. Maximilian, another question.
Thank you very much. Maybe two connected questions. First one, you mentioned already the existing laws in several member states. France has one, Germany is working on one. What will happen on these existing laws, or to these existing laws, or to these proposals, now that there will be an EU Space Act? What exactly will they be superseded? And do you anticipate hard negotiations with the Council, seeing the protests of some member states, including Germany, Italy, against having the form of a regulation already before the proposal came out back in January? Thank you.
Well, regulation is a regulation, so it will be implemented if it will be approved. But it will be implemented in all EU member states in the same way. So this is one thing, and that is a difference from directive, because what we see from the practice, sometimes implementation of directives in different member states is not absolutely equal. So here we think that really a regulation of such an importance like rules of the road in space, that needs very precise implementation. So that is why we made a choice to have exactly regulation.
Thank you very much. This closes this press point. Thank you very much, Commissioner. And there's also a space exhibition in the Berlaymont in case you want to attend. Have a good afternoon.